what is the desired outcome and what systems do I need to put in place in order to get me to that desired outcome.
Always having that open communication is number one.
Leaders aren't taking care of themselves, so it's trickling down to the teams.
It's where you put specific things, how you organize specific things, the hierarchy of specific things that allow you to be more successful in whatever you're doing.
Welcome back to the Beyond the Cleats podcast. I'm here with Ailaina, and today we are going to be talking about systems. Systems in sports, in team sports, systems in your personal and professional life. We're going to break that down and see what that looks like. And I want to start off by sharing a really awesome quote with you guys. I first heard the quote from this other podcast called Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson, and it comes from the book The Atomic Habits. If you haven't read it, it's an awesome book. And essentially the quote goes, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And it's so true, because we think so much from a goal-oriented standpoint of reaching those goals, reaching those benchmarks. But sometimes we forget the building blocks that get us there, whether that's systems within a team or systems within your own personal life, whether that's professional, whether that's within sport itself, in the performance aspect of it. So we're going to get into that and break that down. Ailaina, how would you define for the folks out there that have never kind of heard that terminology before of a system?
Yeah, so systems and preparation, obviously, we've been talking about how important they are in every facet of your life. It could be like your career, it could be sports. For me right now, the biggest place where I utilize like systems is my college soccer team. And for us, it's being able to organize our team to be as strategically successful as we can, on the field and off the field, because we are all people first, right? So we have to build systems within ourselves to be better players. They go hand in hand with one another. And the systems are just the organizational like hierarchy of how we do things, whether it be like tactics, or it be game day rituals. Like it kind of goes down to a bunch of different things that make up our core values and make us who we are. And if we don't have those, it makes a difference between a good team and a great team. You'll see it in every level of athletics or professionally as well, I'm sure. You've had careers or jobs maybe where some managers or I guess leaders are better at creating systems for success than others.
Oh, absolutely. And I would even say, from my understanding, habits are habitual, systems are systematic. When I was reading Atomic Habits, it was almost like being systematic of where you place those habits, where you place those actions within your day. And that kind of creates a system. Would you agree with that?
The key word is organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's where you put specific things, how you organize specific things, the hierarchy of specific things that allow you to be more successful in whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fine to have all these different things, right? Like you'd be like, I don't know, maybe like practicing, eating, like those sort of things are just like habits and things that you do in your life. But prioritizing specific things, like for us, number one thing is humility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like we're people first. We're all people. So like that's number one for us in our organizational charts, that we're good people and then we become good players. At least for my soccer team, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But that can go into every aspect of everything. So like even in the military, I'm still a person first, and then I'm in the Air Force, and then I do my job, and then I have like specific things under that, right? So it's all organized, and that's just the organizational hierarchy of things that matter from 1 to like whatever 50. I don't know, you could probably come up with like 50 things and that all make up your system, but it's the organization of it.
So would you say, from a performance aspect in kind of preparing your players and preparing your team, in addition to building that culture of people first,
Yeah.
what would be an example of an organizational system that you've implemented to increase player performance from a coaching perspective?
Tons. The answer is tons. There's not really like one thing specifically. But if I'm understanding your question correctly, I feel like first there would be like communication, right? So we have to have feedback flows, we have to have open and honest communication, we have to be able to like have those tough conversations with our players, their coaching staff, with athletic trainers, everyone, right? So number one's like open, honest communication. That's like what we need. If we don't have that, we like if we aren't talking to each other, what do we have?
How do you create that?
You create that by building a team culture and environment in which people feel respected, can trust one another, and know that no matter what, they can make any mistake, but like someone will have their back. Will have their back. Like I don't think that any of my players could sit there and say that if they texted me at any time that I wouldn't have their back for any reason.
Mhm.
Any reason. It could be like they've done something so dumb and like whatever, and someone else might harp on them about it, but like no matter what, I'll have their back. Like they shouldn't have a question in their head that I wouldn't have their back
100%, 100%.
because they make mistakes all the time, right, on the field.
Mhm,
But I encourage that.
mhm.
But there's other coaches out there that don't encourage that and make it scary for players to like try new things, and that's when people get complacent, and that's where we stay at the same level that we're at, right? We never get better.
It's kinda creating that culture or that kind of system and environment of it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
We're gonna get better. Failure is just a stepping stone, which goes into kind of that competition preparation of, you know, if there is something that happens on the field that wasn't ideal, it's okay. It kinda goes into that performance preparation of it. And that's even, I would even go as far as saying, like, when you're making your practice plans, there's a systematic way where it's like, okay, you're gonna make sure you get your warm up in, and then, like, I know for like softball, like at Plymouth State, it was almost we'd have pretty much the same practice structure, maybe little things tweaked once we got kind of into the season of things we had to work on, where it's like you're warming up, you're throwing, and then you're gonna do fielding, and then we would go into batting, and that was kind of like a system or a structure where it's like, again, going back to, like, habits, like, those were, like, the habits that you did,
Yeah.
those are the little things that you did, but what make it a system is having that like you said, that structure of it. Now, what would you say from a personal let's take the athlete scenario first.
Yeah.
From a uh, just personal athlete scenario, are there things within like, what would be an example of, like, a system for, like, a soccer player who individually just wanted to get better, maybe, like, on the field, off the field, what would be an example of a system for, like, a typical student athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you've gone through your own as well. But for me personally, like there's so many different levels of it. But the number one thing is right, is reaching out and asking your coaches or even like seniors, maybe other people that have more expertise and experience in this, topic that you're trying to improve at. Like going out and seeking that feedback of like, okay, number one, let's have the open, honest communication. What am I lacking? How am I going to get better, but also how am I going to get on the field, and what do you need as a coaching staff or as like a teammate from me to have that reliance, I guess, on me to be able to do
Mhm.
my job. So that's number one, is like going out and actively seeking that feedback.
Yeah,
Because
to reach those goals, to get that desired outcome of
if
more
you don't
playing
even
time.
right, if you don't even know like what the expectation is, how am I ever gonna get there?
Mhm.
So having that expectation, but that also comes from your coaching staff to begin with. They should already have that expectation laid out for you. But it changes over the season, right? Different
Mhm.
players, different people get injured, things like that.
Yeah.
Different expectations. So always having that open communication is like number one. I would say for me personally, I was always on top of my nutrition, so I always knew what I was needing to keep my body in the best form or position to be physically, successful and have that. Soccer season is so physically demanding.
Mhm.
Like, you need to be on top of your physical health. You have to, or else you're never gonna be where you want to be. So that's important. But then also watching soccer outside, going in the gym outside, like doing those extra things that people typically don't like to do because it takes more energy, right? So it's
Yeah,
easy to just go to
100%.
practice and like if your coach is like, yeah, runs through a session that's like tactically sound and we have goals in mind, things like that. But all those extra little small things are what's gonna make you a better player in the long run.
Mhm.
Watching soccer is like number one for us, right? I'm like, go watch someone who's better in that position and see how they perform, what they do. Maybe study up on how they what their pregame rituals are, what they do before a match, and like things that they do to like clear their brain before they get on the field. Those are all things that are going to be helpful.
Oh, 100%. And from what it sounds like, those are all little actions or little habits that are gonna increase your performance as a player. Watching film, going to the field to get some extra reps, taking care of your nutrition, taking care of your sleep. So it's like those little pillars that all come together, and it's as an individual, it's almost reflecting on what is the desired outcome and what systems do I need to put in place in order to get me to that desired outcome.
Right.
It's okay, I need to get more sleep because that's going to increase my performance. Okay, I need to go to bed at X time and I need to incorporate that into my daily routine. I need to watch extra film. Okay, well, I have classes on at 12 and then I have a class at 3. Let me take 90 minutes between that 12 and 3 class to just go in the lounge area or go in the dorms and just watch that little bit of film. It's almost like putting in and finding those puzzle pieces that creates your system. A perfect example of nutrition, meal prep.
Yeah.
What's the best time for you to meal prep? I'm terrible at meal prepping. And it's tough because you really have to plan it out.
Well, and as a college athlete, it's a little bit different too. Right?
Yeah.
You don't have probably the ability in a dorm to meal prep or do things like that. I 1000% get that. But there's like specific things you can put in your body to like have or that will have an exponential growth in your performance. Like
Mhm.
there's specific things, maybe you stay away from like some of the like more fast foody type things that are going to be like staying in your gut forever and not able to digest. Things like that where you can control those things that make a big difference.
Yeah, control the controllables.
Yeah.
And it's the same way on the professional side too, where you have those systems like in place. Like we talked about kind of those communication loops. And again, knowing what the clear expectation is of of everyone within the team. Perfect example is I'm a study coordinator, so that's me as the role of a study coordinator, but also the role as a technician. So I'm kind of like a planner, but also executioner. Or I think that may yeah, execute.
Yeah. You're good. It makes sense.
And then you have the principal investigator who writes the study and everything like that. And then on top of that, so I also in this particular study, I had a kind of a co-coordinator where he was very good at kind of the technical side of things, where I was more very had better strengths on kind of the planning and like scheduling side of things, more like the logistics. So, and there were times where I would kind of go over into his realm and he'd kind of go over into my realm and it didn't really work. So it was having that communication of, "Hey, I'm gonna be in charge of the schedule because I need to talk directly to the PI, and we need to have that direct communication." And it's like but it's also, again, saying, "I appreciate your help with this," and there would be times where I would go to him for insight, But again, it's having that direct communication of like, okay, this is my lane, this is your lane, this is where we can kind of overlap. And if you need help or if I need help, we're able to kind of go back and forth. And that's again creating that communication system. Same thing like when uh we have these like calendars, and sometimes he would put stuff on the calendar. Very helpful, very helpful. What we started to realize is other studies that were using those spaces wouldn't know who to communicate with. So it's like, okay, let's streamline the process. Another perfect example, when we're doing the data collection, we created the system of parroting, like, okay, blood pressure is blah 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 blah. Got it. Blood pressure is blah 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 blah. Closed communication loop. I
Yeah.
love closed communication loops.
Military all the time.
Is it? Is it? It seems like that's probably where I got it from.
It's
Was
huge
the with the
military.
closed communication loop?
Yeah. So in the military, we do that a lot because we want everyone to be on the same page. So if we're like on the shooting line or something like that, or maybe we're doing some riot training, whatever it may be, someone will bark a command, like probably your squad lead or something, and then the entire squad says the same command, so everyone's on the same page. So just make sure that we're like all together. Like again, it's another part of organization, right?
Mhm.
Making sure that everyone's on the same page, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, because that's how you build that organizational core and that structure based off of the personnel you have.
Mhm.
Because you're not going to do that without knowing people's strengths and weaknesses. It's like the number one thing, right? You have to know the people you're working with, especially as like a leader of an organization, like a coach or a teacher or something like that. Like
Yeah,
you have to
absolutely. When
know
you're in
your
any sort
personnel.
of leadership position.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. If you don't know your personnel, you're never gonna be as successful as you can be.
Now, how would you go about, again, this could be, in your, professional scenario, or also your in coaching, would you go about implementing a new system from an organizational standpoint?
Like coming in brand new or coming into a place like, so if I were to come in next year and create a new system for Let's See Soccer.
Yeah, like brand new. Like, all right, we need.
Off
You
of
see a
people I
gap.
already know or off of people I don't know?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's go with people you do know.
So that it puts me at a little bit of an advantage, right? So I do have the luxury of knowing specifics. Like I get to know who's positional, right? I get to know all their positions. I get to know what their majors are. I get to know what makes them tick. If someone's gonna make a run or not make a run, like I get to know all those strategic tendencies that someone who's coming in brand new doesn't get to know.
Mhm.
So for me, I know based off of what I know, because I only know what I know, right? And I don't know like anything else. So I'm just going off of my own experiences and what I have processed beforehand,
Mhm.
being their coach. I know that I can come in and I have the respect already. I have the trust already. I have the motivation and the organization to know that I could probably give them a whole new structure and they would have my back, right?
Mhm.
But it comes from all of those qualities that I already have.
Mm.
It comes from, if I were to be their assistant coach and they didn't have any of those things, they didn't have respect, trust, they didn't listen to me, they didn't care what I had to say, I would have no ground to stand on creating a new system because I wouldn't have those things. I'd have to gain those things to see the systems like start being utilized or
Mhm.
being respected.
Gotcha. So how would you go about, let's say you wanted to create a system that, let's say there was no kind of communication loop, right? And you wanted to improve that closed communication loop within your team.
Yeah.
How would you go about kind of implementing that? Is that kind of having a conversation with your team? And again, guys, this can apply to not only like from a sports coaching perspective, this can apply, in the professional world as well, because we all work in teams. So,
Yeah, absolutely. It's having communication. It's going out and being like, this is my expectation for you guys. All right, now what are your questions? First off,
mhm,
and what can I do better as a coach to allow you to get to where I want you to be. So if you're not there, what can I do better so that you can get there? So like, for instance, if I have a player that's like, I'm like maybe not technically as sound as another player, but I need to be at this level. I need to be able to play the 6 and like, which is like our holding midfielder. If that's their position, that's what they want to do, and they want to be a starter, right? I know the specifics that I'm looking for in a 6, what I need from them. So I tell them, I'm like, hey, this is what I need, X, Y, Z. I need you to win balls. I need you to distribute balls. I need you to be calm. I need you to be cool, collected, and like they're kind of like the QB of soccer. So like
Gotcha.
they're pretty much the playmakers, right? They're distributing balls, deciding which side of the field gets the ball, sorts of things like that. I lay it all out for them, and then I say to them, now how can I guide you better in that process? What can I do that will help you get there? And maybe it's like spending a little bit extra time with the 6s and being like, all right, maybe I step on the field and I'm like, all right, watch me for a bit. I just got on the field yesterday with them, and they were able to see like, oh, that's what you mean. You know what I mean?
Sometimes visualizing it from a sports perspective, like mechanically,
Yeah.
it's definitely seeing it definitely helps. So it seems like you're almost setting the expectation. So you're communicating that expectation and communicating where improvement needs to be had, whether it's again going back to that communication scenario, saying, okay, we need to have a better communication loop within the team. And it's going to them and essentially saying, this is what's happening. This is the expectation. This is where I want to be. How can I help?
Yeah.
Which it's really where leaders need to be. And to how this is my expectation. These are our goals. This is where we want to be. How can we create the systems to get there? And what do you need from me as a leader to get there? Which is very well said.
And identifying your own shortcomings, right? So like, I'm not perfect. I mean, I joke about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm perfect. We're perfect over here. But I'm not. Like, I'm a human being. I make mistakes. I have shortcomings. I have things that I need to work on myself. And there's things that a lot of times that I'm not even aware of my own tendencies, right? So when I have my own players being like, hey, like, you're really direct. Like, maybe like if you're just like, which they like, right? There's a balance of that. But then there's also like an emotional side because I coach female soccer. So like it can't always be 1000% direct. It has to be like, okay, they have feelings, they have emotions, things like that. All right, let me take a step back. All right, this is how I would do it instead. Direct, but also like, how are your feelings? Like, what do you feel about this? Or is there a way I could have said this better so that it reaches you in a different way than maybe like it would for like a male soccer player where you can scream at them and be like,
yeah,
you better,
100%.
like, you know, like,
Yeah.
they could just scream at them and they're fine. Female soccer players are not like that.
Well, and then that goes. That was kind of gonna be my next thing of
Beat you to it.
yeah, of essentially, as leaders or just as individuals, we have systems, our own personal systems that need to be in place. Again, on the professional side, we talked a lot so much so far kind of from the organizational aspect, but I truly believe it starts with the individual and having your own systems in place. I bet you have systems in place. I know you mentioned being on the podcast, you journal a lot.
Right.
That's part of your system. That's part of your reflection of, clearing the headspace, which you probably have systems in place when it comes to evaluating players.
So yeah, player evaluation's cool. I really like player evaluations. I like reflecting. So throughout the season, pretty much every practice, maybe every other practice, you're taking mental notes all the time. You know, you can remember specific things about specific players and stuff like that. But I found that like I need to write things down because number one, I forget things. I think that I'm like this superhuman that can just like remember everything, absorb everything. And it's just not the case.
Yeah, you gotta write it down.
I gotta write it down. I mean, I've got like between them and then I have 2 other teams I coach club. Like there's a lot of players I coach. There's gonna be things I forget about each player. There's gonna be things that I remember because they're just who they are, right? core individuals are like, you remember specific things about them, but there's like small nuances, like maybe like their left foot was weak that day, or like consistently their left foot becomes more weak, but like I don't see that, but I write in my notes, okay, they had poor left foot, poor left foot, poor left foot. All right, now I can go to them and be like, hey, this game, I saw you get rid of the ball on your left foot poorly four different occasions. All right, let's work on that. Let's do this so that we'll go on a field, we'll do this specific drill, we'll do a lot of left-footed turns, stuff like that, so that you get more comfortable on your left foot, so that when it comes to a game, we can utilize that.
Yeah, and that in itself is a system. And we talked about this, I think, when, it comes to when it came to giving advice, where I mentioned, kind of the 3-strike rule. It's that system of I'm going to observe, I'm going to observe, evaluate, and then give advice.
Yeah.
Which that in itself is a system. So it's those 3 little actions that you're doing. You're observing, to then you're writing in your notes, you're going through evaluating your notes, and then you're giving advice and solutions.
Right, and it's
again,
funny.
that's like a little system.
It is all funny because it all comes back to different smaller systems within the big like organizational core, right? So like
100%.
even off of giving advice, like for me, I'm already doing extra research on like how I can, like as a coach, how I can train someone better in that, like you said, like left foot. Like I'll be like, all right, what are like 7 different drills? All right, I'll look through the 7 different drills and I'll be like, okay, this will work good for them. This will look good for that. Like we'll go through and do like little things. But I'm learning myself to be able to teach better because
100%.
I don't know everything.
100%.
I played soccer for 20 years. I still don't know everything, and I will never know everything about the game. Soccer's unique in the sense that a lot of systems and structures that other teams can use, like basketball has a lot of plays, right? Hockey has some, baseball and softball have a ton, right? They literally call out pitches and things like that.
Yep.
Soccer's not like that. Soccer, we give them like a formation, a core way to start. So like for my team, it's like a 4-3-3. Like that's what we would go with, and we'd play, and we know like where we're supposed to be at what time, things like that. But we're not joysticking around playing. Like really good basketball coaches and stuff can like throw their players in good positions to be successful. We can't do that. We just have to give them this overarching like guidance, and they have to utilize it themselves, which is the
100%.
difference between like a lot of sports. And I like soccer because it is so mentally challenging and physically challenging, right, within 90 minutes. So not only is it physically, but it's mentally. There's both sides of it, which makes it really fun to coach and really fun to see developmental side of the game and see my players like rise to the occasion and grow and develop, which is a huge part of like your system and your core, right? Development.
100%. So what is this system in place you have for yourself? So let's, from a personal perspective on any topic, what's a system that you've had to incorporate into your life? And again, systems in terms of like a series of habits to get a desired outcome.
Yeah.
Like when you're training, when you're running, do you have any systems in place that have helped you improve?
All the time. Oh my gosh, yeah. It could be like in the weight room too. It could be anywhere. I had the luxury of being a young athlete where someone pulled me aside and was like, you need to go like strength train because you're probably going to get injured if you don't. So from a very young age, probably like 14 or 15, I was learning about the gym, the importance of lifting and gaining muscle and knowing how that can transition from my regular life to my sports life to like after college, right? So the importance of all that stuff from the weight room.
Oh my gosh, it's almost like what we talk about in this podcast and how it all connects.
Oh,
That's why it's so important, guys.
so important. But then, so yes. So I'm gonna get ahead of myself if I keep going down that train. But to what I was going back to in reference of like the gym and systems and things like that is that like I started at nothing. I didn't know anything about lifting weights. I didn't even know what a dumbbell was. But now like I can go out there and I can like put programs together for myself, for my team, for some of my friends will ask me like, hey, if what do you think I should do if I want to like, work on my hamstrings or whatever. I'm like, oh, do this.
What's the thought process in writing a program?
You would know more than me, but 'cause you do way more than me.
I
But for me personally,
think about it. You have a desired outcome. You have a goal.
yeah.
So how do you
Mine's
systematically
different.
think about that?
Mine's different than a lot of people. So like a lot of people go to the gym and hit like specific body type, like those would be like arms, legs, like tris, bis, whatever. For me, I know that in the military, in my outside life, and what I wish to attain, I personally always do full body workouts.
Mhm.
So that starts out with like a nice like run or like agility, things like that like get my body like warm. Then I go into my lift and it's like, all right, I'm gonna do like power lifts first, or I'm doing like a clean or like a sumo deadlift or like a bench or something like heavy that's like gonna be like my fundamental like muscle building for like the bigger groups, right?
Yeah,
And
100%.
then as I get down further into my like workout, it's more of about like the smaller muscles. I'm doing like scaption raises, like I don't know, face pulls, like maybe like a RDL or like a skater lunge or
Mhm.
those smaller muscles that like people forget about, because I know that I want to be a well-rounded human and I want to be a well-rounded like they say like a warrior athlete or warrior defender or
Warrior
like
athlete,
yeah, like
tactical athlete.
so yeah, like I know that like that's an expectation for myself.
Mhm.
So I don't go and just hit like tries and buys and blah blah blah, make things like I don't do it to be aesthetically pleasing at all. Now,
Yeah.
if it comes, that comes with what I'm doing already. And usually it
Does.
will, right? Yeah,
It
it will because I'm working hard, right? So, like,
Mhm.
people always compliment my arms, my legs, or, like, my toe muscle and things like that. But that's not my goal whatsoever. I want to be a functional member of my unit, and I want to be a functional member of society.
Yeah.
So, in order to do that, I hit those cores in my workouts every single time I go work out. There's not a time where I'm just like randomly hitting one muscle group. I'm not. I'm always hitting everything. But that leaves me like super sore after all the time. But that's fine because that's my expectation for myself.
Yeah. And it comes back to the core of you have this goal, you have this expectation of yourself of this is what is required in my profession for me to complete the goal, complete the mission. And that's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, backtracking to this is what I need to do to get to that goal. Again, strength training is a perfect example of if you don't go to the gym, you're not going to get those results. And again, that's going back to the quote, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Because you could have these goals, and the, I've written so many programs for myself, just like you, and I would always fall short. I still fall short. I still struggle with being consistent. And it's me realizing I have these goals of what I want to hit and where I want to be performance-wise, but I didn't really
The
stop
system.
to evaluate what my system is. Because I could say, I want to hit X, Y, and Z, and I want to, lift 3 times a week and run 3 times a week, and that's the goal.
Right.
But it's looking back and evaluating how can I implement that. It's evaluating my schedule, it's evaluating what is possible and what is feasible, and that's where the systems come in. It's again putting in those little daily habits that create that that system.
I also think that sometimes people are just looking at it from the wrong perspective.
Okay.
So
Elaborate.
I know a lot of people that want to like maybe like lose weight or something like that.
Mhm.
So like it's more like their goal is to hit a certain weight, right?
Mhm.
Instead of their goal being to just like be functional and be like like have a better like life, right? Like or
Mhm.
maybe like I don't know what it would be like, but a lot of people like have that.
More of that intrinsic.
Yes, right.
That intrinsic
Instead of
want to
instead of
set
having the goal of being like numbers based, like or like to like skinny, like all the magazines and things like that. Like people should have the mentality that I am doing this for myself to better myself, because
100%.
really it's just me versus me. It's not me versus that model in that magazine, because you're never going to meet that person. It's not something that's like probably healthy either. I don't know,
Or
I can't
feasible.
speak for everyone, but like I know from like just what I've read and what I've seen is that a lot of people that have those types of like bodies are like really like mentally like not doing okay, or like have
Mhm.
specific things going on, or maybe like bad relationships with food and things like that, because of the expectation of like it being a scale based goal versus being like fit for yourself, like
Yeah,
a fit
absolutely.
person.
Well, and nutrition's another example of I don't like me personally. I've removed the word diet from my vocabulary and I've used nutrition or nutrition plan. I have a nutrition plan where it's diet gives you the idea that it's temporary.
Right.
Nutrition is lifelong.
Right.
And I think it's like you said, you need to have kind of those systems that are can carry out long periods of time.
Yeah, right. Well, different goals
Through the
too.
lifetime. Yeah.
Because if you're so based on like, all right, I need to be like 120 pounds, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, whatever, instead of just being like, I need to be fit, it's a lot easier to be fit than be 120 pounds if you're like
100%.
at like 160 or something and you're trying to hit that goal. Like, that's a big difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can be fit and not be 120 pounds because muscle weighs more than fat.
Yep.
Like, if we're going to be completely honest.
Oh, 100%.
Right? So it's
100%.
it's that shift of like your perspective or your verbiage on
Language is huge.
Mhm.
It really shifts the brain, and it tricks your brain, because there are times where I'll still like say diet and I'll be like it just has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
Even in like the professional workspace, I try to, when I'm communicating with my team or I'm communicating with my superiors, I like to use what I'd refer to as like positive language or neutral language, where even if it's, let's say, not an ideal scenario, I want to try to use neutral language of like, okay, this volunteer is a potential drop. Can't they, do X, Y, and Z, instead of saying like, oh, it's terrible. That also goes back into planning, and I won't get too
Yeah.
far into that, but it's like you
Well, it kind of goes in your systems, because when you have things like that where you build your team and you recruit people, but like you only do it based off of like film and like seeing them at one game and meeting them one time, and everyone tries to put their best foot forward, right? You never know where you're actually going to get until they come in and they start playing with your team, how they're actually going to fit, how their personalities, like maybe they're like, they were super positive when you saw them at the field,
Yeah.
but then like they come in and they're like just have like super toxic relationships. Identifying those toxic relationships, but also knowing that like you can change, you can have effect on others.
Mhm.
So like they're not a lost cause because of that.
No.
But like I personally as a coach would like work really hard to give that person what they need to feel like maybe worthy in or organization, because once they do, then they start like falling back into like the rest of the team. You're like, oh, this feels way better being like this, instead of having that like those toxic traits that I used to have and used to fall back on. And it you can learn so much from those toxic relationships, and you can learn it could be even from like, right, we talk about in relationships with breakups and things like that.
Yeah, 100%.
You learn most from things that don't work.
Absolutely.
That don't work. And that's all part of knowing your system and knowing your organization and falling back on your systems.
Well, it's systems and values.
Right.
It's
Well, like code of conducts for teams, right? So we have specific things we need. So we build a code of conduct. It kind of all goes, probably hit every part of like what I'm like trying to reach systematically.
Yeah.
But like those are all things that are instrumental for creating a core in an organization.
Well, and I don't remember where I heard this quote from. I've heard it 2 different times, and I'm probably gonna butcher it a little bit, but essentially what the speaker was explaining is when you put someone in an environment, professional, team, the good can be great.
Mm-hmm.
You put them in a good environment, If they're good, the good can be great. And even if, like you said, the kid comes in, maybe has an attitude problem, something's off there
Right.
with the expectations of the culture. They could still be good. There's still that opportunity. But you put a good kid or a good person, and again, this is in general terms, in a bad or negative environment, they're going to decrease.
Yeah, negativity, like what's the saying, misery loves company.
Yep.
There it is.
Yep.
I was like, it wasn't coming to me. But it's true. It does. It's so much easier to just sit around a bunch of people that just like want to complain and nag and do this and whatever. And it's like, it's hard to build an effective culture, an effective organization, team, like any program. It's hard. It's hard work. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of buy-in.
Oh, 100%.
And that's the number one thing, is the buy-in.
Yeah.
You have to have the buy-in, or you're never going to be successful.
Well, and again, like you said, it starts with the leaders, and it starts with the leaders having systems within themselves.
Right.
And having kind of that groundedness to them. Like you have systems in place to create a practice plan, create a communication loop, create a system to objectively evaluate players.
A system to run a session.
Yeah,
a system to play
so
a game.
you have these systems
Mm-hmm.
in place, and that also starts with caring of you,
Mm-hmm.
taking care of yourself, because I truly believe if you take care of yourself, if you one of my mentors refers to this as kind of preparing the vessel, or I like to use like creating your arc. If you create your arc and you create your systems and you know what your values are and you know what your expectations are and are able to reflect to objectively communicate them, then that's going to trickle down to your teams, to your organizations. And I think, at least on the professional side, I haven't seen too much of that for me personally, but I know it's out there, where the leaders aren't taking care of themselves, especially like with use like corporate America. Leaders aren't taking care of themselves, so it's trickling down to the teams in the organization.
You see it everywhere, and it's honestly so unfortunate. I mean, I've had so many situations where like I know really good leaders and really good mentors that just like forget how important it is to take care of themselves. And I've been there. I'm not gonna lie. Like I've been one of those people. I've always been positive. I've always been a happy-go-lucky person. I've always been a motivator. That's just me to the core. But some injuries, especially my ACL, I didn't know how to take care of myself. I was so lost. Like, you know what I mean? I didn't know where to even start, because something that I valued so much, like soccer, was taken out of my life. I didn't know what else to do. But I had really good mentors and people and friends and family to get me out of those situations, right? But what if someone doesn't have people to do that? Then it's someone in the organization has to be like, hey, like, check yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's
100%.
like so one thing that I'll talk about when it comes to like teams and organizations and things like that is that a lot of toxic teams happen because they fear each other. They fear like playing time. They fear making mistakes. They fear, there's a lot of fear involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, you see the good organizations are people that can rely on their teams, rely on their systems, rely on their staff, rely on their teammates to pick them up on the days that they're bad. It goes the same way, right?
Yeah, 100%.
As a leader, you have to be able to rely on the people around you, your players and things, to be like, whoa, something's off. You're acting weird today. Are you okay? Hey, like, did something happen? Like, I deserve to be checked in as much as I check in on someone else.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So, like, it goes hand in hand. And when I was talking about, like, the external fear factor of, like, those toxic teams, it comes from the leadership, right? It comes from putting people against each other when they're supposed to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens everywhere. You'll find it in toxic
100%.
workplace environments. You'll find it in classrooms. You'll find it in friend groups. Believe it or not,
Oh, 100%.
I've been in friend groups where they just like fear each other, and they're like, oh, they talk bad about each other, and they're like,
like a lot of one-upping.
yeah, yes, accomplishments, right? They'll be like, oh, I deserve that accomplishment. Maybe you do deserve that accomplishment, but be proud of the person that did earn that reward or accolade because you love them, right? Not because, but that's where it comes with like the systems and having that trust, that respect, and that compassion for the people that you are in an organization with.
And again, I truly believe it goes back to taking care of oneself and being able to look objectively of where you want to go, where you want to go, and where you are now.
Yeah.
And again, what can I do systematically? What habits can I implement into my schedule to create those systems? Like a perfect example is like with this podcast. I've never done a podcast before. This is my I've done video editing. It's a learning curve. So I had to figure out, okay, if I want to put out a weekly podcast, I need to put systems in place to where, okay, on Wednesdays, this is our editing day from this time to this time. And then on Fridays, this is our, social media day from this time to this time. So it's creating those little habits that create the system of doing a weekly podcast. But again, that also is, I got to take care of myself.
Yes, too. It's also when we're talking about like failures and things like that. Failures are okay, right? Like, so this morning we had a tough morning. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. We charged batteries. They apparently didn't take the charge. We had sound problems. We were like, should we go headphones? No headphones. Like, we just had a lot of things
I
going
have a
on.
book on one of our tripods.
There's a book on a tripod. We I don't even know. The other week I broke one of the stands. So we've been having a time and a half here at Beyond the Cleats podcast. But we have good systems in place where we know that no matter what, we can still get done when we need to get done. We wanted to get an episode. Here we are. We got batteries charged. We got finally. We have our outlines. We have everything we need, and we're still here making this podcast. But that's because we have built this environment based off of our mutual love for this podcast to get through those hard times and those failures that aren't really failures. They're just part of the process.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And I think it's our mutual respect for each other as well. And also taking care of ourselves and our communication that, again, makes that positive environment. And I think that's the big thing we're getting out here is if you want to create systems within your organization and to be that positive leader, it starts with creating those finding those habits that you want to implement and then creating the system within your daily personal and professional life to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about you. I mean, you're the number one. You're the driver of your own ship, right?
You're the driver of your own ship.
And then how you live your life will affect others.
Mm-hmm. You got to create the sails. You got to put in all those little screws to create the sails to steer the ship.
Absolutely.
Ailaina, this was awesome. We'll check you guys next time on the Beyond the Cleats podcast. Thank you guys.